All right. Here we are. Hello there. Fire Boy, this is my channel. Welcome. We're going to do some writing as we do. Hopefully everyone is having a good day so far. My day is starting off better than yesterday finished, that's for sure. Yesterday I had the wonderful pleasure of getting rear-ended while on the freeway. So that was exciting. Fortunately for me, my car did a wonderful job of doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And the bumper took the brunt of it. I have a cracked bumper and a dented muffler and nothing else, which is just about the best result I could have asked for when I had to slow down on slick roads and the person riding my tail behind me did not leave enough space to do the same. So, passive-aggressive frustration aside, things turned out okay. Mostly I'm just really happy that I kept my car under control, everything was fine, pulled off to the side, no issues, no one got hurt. It's just an accident, as happens. Frustrating and something you wish wouldn't happen, but, you know, get through it, and here we are today. Everything's fine. My car still drives wonderfully, just a little more noisy than usual because of that muffler dent, but yeah, so there we go. So that's my life in a nutshell this morning. Can I say hopefully no one else is dealing with any sort of similar frustrations. Can't say I'm too surprised that something like that happened. We are at the very beginning of winter around here, which means roads are slick, but people have not adjusted their driving habits to do so yet. And so the result is pretty consistently a lot of people driving too fast, driving too close on unsafe roads, and resulting in these types of things. So just, throw out the PSA there. If you're driving and you're in a climate where things are getting cold, and there's precipitation, whether it's rain or snow, even more so if it's rain, honestly, slow down. Slow down. Leave that extra space between you and the person in front of you, because you don't know when traffic is going to have to slow down suddenly because of backups, because of other accidents up and ahead of you. You just don't know. So that's why you got to leave that space. So, learn from the person who is driving behind me's mistake. Anyway, I can stop harping on that. It's probably not healthy for me to dwell on it too much anyway. The one other relevant point to that, though, is I am waiting for a call back from my insurance claims rep. So you never know when they're going to call, so I may have to pause or leave the stream midstream unexpectedly today. I actually have a couple calls I'm waiting for that may disrupt things. So I'm going to do my best to just sit here, have some nice chill writing time, as I like to do. But, life happens, and we'll deal with that if it comes to that. But, like I say, maybe it's best for me to stop harping on all that and just actually get to some writing. So let's transition ourselves over. There we are. Okay, so yesterday we worked on our city of Khagdural here, and just as I'm trying to make a habit to give a quick rundown of everything that we've been working on here. Let me pull up an extra map here. We'll just do a quick recap of sort of the project that we're working on for anyone who's cutting in mid-project, which is very likely because we've been working on this project for many months at this point in time. So what we're working on is a full campaign that will take D&D 5e players from level 1 to level 10, somewhere thereabout. Maybe more, maybe less, just depends on what their progression is, but that's sort of the intention of it. The basic premise of this campaign is that players will begin as part of a team that is trying to develop a new trade route through a very dangerous part of the world. They're trying to map out a safe route that's defensible and can be used to make travel and all of that a bit more expedient in a world that has largely been ripped apart by past calamity. In doing so, though, they have accidentally traversed through the territory of a dragon who is disinterested in letting them build their trade route, but a deal is struck in which the dragon, who is trying to gain access, has been for a long time, to a place called the Hall of Wisdom, It's been locked up. He wants to get in there. He says, all right, buckos, if you can get me the keys to this place, I will let you build your trade route through my territory. And that seems like a pretty good deal to everyone, presumably, assuming our players are willing to accept the call to adventure. And so off they go on this adventure. The first key, at this point in what we're working on, they have found the first key, which was hidden up here in the mountains around the giant territory up in these mountains. Went through a few trials and tribulations to get that. And then the next story beat is that they are working their way down to what they believe will be an abandoned dwarven city called Khagdural. Although they will swiftly find, at this point, they'll have found out that it is not abandoned, but instead now being run by Durgar. So they're working to find the key that they thought would just be in an empty dwarven city and is now in a Durgar city. And that's kind of where we left off. A bit more detailed. The last dungeon we made was this place called the Lost Tunnels. This is a sort of labyrinth final defense that the dwarves had made back in the day to try and, stop invaders from coming in. It's a very labyrinth place, easy for people to get lost and trapped in. It's the whole point, and our players need to navigate that without any assistance because there's no dwarves left. But when they get to the end of it and reach Khagdural, they're either going to be captured by the Durgar, or they can evade capture and have to be sneaking through the city of Khagdural. Either way, the result is they're in Khagdural and have to somehow learn about the best way to go about finding the key. And so what we're going to do, what we're going to start off working on here is, here's our notes page. I'm going to, this is something that I want to do a little bit, or not want to do a little bit more, the better way to say it is, need to do to clarify some things. We need to add a couple other important things to our map here. So we're going to put this here, we're going to put shops there, because we need to add another overarching bullet point here, and we're going to do mission hooks. Now this is where we can put in whether it's a campaign mission or, excuse me, that's very rude of me, whether we're going to put in a main campaign mission hook or a side mission hook, which we are eventually going to work on adding side missions to all steps of this campaign once we finish the actual primary campaign. And this is a good holding place to put that stuff, and we can do our main campaign hooks here. So that's where I'm going to put that stuff. And I need to just basically put in, we'll put in if captured. Let's see here. King, what was his name? King Ormic. Let's CK Nightbrand. Ormic Nightbrand. Will come and discuss with players. I'm going to put a note here. Starts as interrogation, turns into mutual opportunity. Because what he's going to say is, let's see here. We'll say suspects that key is in the dwarven vaults. Will offer to release players if they open the vaults for the Durgar. And what we'll do is we'll say offer to release players with the key they seek if they open the vaults for the Durgar. So the idea is that if players say what they're after, or if he pulls out of the players what they're after, he will say, well, sounds like that's probably something that's in the vaults. We've been trying to get into those forever, but we've been unable to breach it. That said, you guys, the idea is he's going to say, you guys have been very effective at traveling through these dungeons, through these mountains, as is evidenced by the fact that you made it here through all of those labyrinths. So, tell you what, if you can go clear out the route, clear out a pathway, get access to the vaults for us, then we'll let you go. Probably he's lying, and we'll go ahead and do probably lying. We'll say probably lying, and the other thing what we're going to say is if players withhold, yeah, there we go, withhold info, revert to the sneak method of info, but they overhear info in jail cell. So if they withhold, then we'll go ahead and make sure that if they're sneaking around, they'll still hear about the vault from like a prison guard, and then they'll have to figure out if they either want to cut a deal or if they want to try and escape from prison. Either option is perfectly acceptable. So we're going to say, let's see here, if sneaking will overhear around town that the king is upset and wants to find the players. So they'll hear that, and then depending on, so here's where things get tricky if they avoid. It really depends on what approach the players take. For the sneaking to work and not be too railroaded, a lot of it's going to depend on what specific route of action the players want to take. And that's a hard thing to plan for. So I'm going to put in some generalized role-playing notes and beats here. And just, we'll just sort of leave that one up to sort of role-playing and craftily dropping information. We'll give ourselves some information, because what we're trying to do with these notes, right, is this isn't, as I've said before, this isn't a campaign that I'm actively running right now. So I need to make sure I plan this for future reference when, I don't remember exactly what I was thinking when I wrote things. I won't have the same context that I have at this moment. So I need to plan things ahead of time, and that's a really good thing to do. Even if it is a campaign that you're playing right now, it's a really good idea to add a lot of extra notes, like DMing notes and tips for yourself. So that way, if you ever pull it out again for a different group, or if your players leave an area and then come back to it in the future, kind of have that context, those notes there you can help yourself with. So it adds extra work up front, but it pays dividends for future session planning. So we'll go ahead and figure that out. Let's find the players. Let's see here. If they approach king, let's see here. Actually, here's what we can do, because we put in some of these other faction leaders here, right? We have Gwynwain, who is sort of an anti-conquest resistance group leader. Will overhear around town about Gwynwain. Right? Was that how we spelled Wayne? Yeah. Over here about Gwynwain and how she also would like to meet with these invaders. Invaders, yeah, there it is. All right. So those are kind of the two options, and I'm assuming, I think it's safe to say that the players will probably approach one or the other, because we can just kind of role play in notes to say, to heavily hint that one or the other is going to be the avenue for things, and that's a little railroady, but at the same time, it is also realistic that there are only so many people in the world who have answers to certain questions, especially when it's questions about, where do I find this one thing that's run by this individual or something like that. So it's not always wrong, as long as you provide them like the options and they have to choose between the known options. That's less railroady. Where it really becomes an issue, I find, is if there's only one option that players will have to take, or if you don't tell them what all of the options are and they just kind of have to randomly flail around. Either of those approaches tend to really gum up the works of a campaign. So providing these couple options that they can overhear and sneak around and find will work. So we're going to go ahead and say, let's add some notes here. King is upset, wants to find the players. If they approach the king sneaky, well, here, let's say if they approach the king openly, revert to captured route. So if they just let themselves go there and go up front and be like, hey, here we are, we're the guys that got away, then the kings will be like, great, you're going to jail now. And then we can revert to that. If they approach sneakily over here, either guards or we'll say the guards actually, let's see here. Players, okay, if they approach sneakily, depending on how they do it, have them spy on either king, prince, or commander. All right, so they can get the information straight from the mouth of one of the higher ups. And I'm going to make this a separate bullet here, because we're going to also add another note here. And it's just best practice. I always learned that if you're using bullet points, if there's something that's only one bullet point, so like if I had this one, that full sentence, and then I just added one bullet point underneath it, then there shouldn't be that next level of bullet point, because it's all just part of the same note. Or you separate things into important notes, and really the main thing here is they're approaching sneakily, and then there's a couple things that stem from them approaching sneakily, which is why I'm doing this. No one asked for that level of grammar efficiency, and grammar lesson, and I'm certainly not one to give it as someone who stopped doing grammatical creative writing education in after a freshman course in college. So I'm certainly not an authority of it, but just explaining my process here, because I know a lot of people are interested in how I take notes and organize things. So anyway, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. So if they approach sneakily, depending, so they can hear information from any of them. Leaders are suspicious that players are after the vaults, and then we'll just go ahead and put in a note here. Feed players tidbits about how Durgar have not had any luck getting in. So that's if they approach it sneakily, and like I say, if they approach him openly, if they approach the king openly, then the king is just like, no, you're going to jail. That's what we wanted to have happen from the beginning, so that's what's going to happen. So we can do that. So that's if they approach the king and they're sneaking through the city. If they want to avoid the king because he wants to capture them, which I think is a very likely thing, at least when I think about my players and what their approach to things would be, I think that's a very likely approach that they would choose to take. And so if that's the case, we'll give them the tidbit about the resistance leader, the Duragar, who doesn't want to be, all manifest destiny about the world, and instead just wants the Durgar to be recognized as a legitimate race to be interacted with, traded with, so on and so forth, just looking for that legitimacy. Gwynwain, they can approach her, and so that's going to be sort of the alternative approach that we can kind of push players towards. Unless they can kind of come up with anything. I mean, the caveat for all of these things, all of our planning, is if players come up with something else goofy and you're willing to yes and your way through role-playing it, anything goes. Anything really goes. We're just trying to give ourselves a few options in case players get stuck and need assistance. So we'll say if they approach Gwynwain, so if they approach her, she will welcome them and want to make plans to subvert the conquest mentality in the city. right? Because that's sort of the prevailing idea. Will know about the vaults and will ask players to help her enter the vaults. Will offer to let them keep what they like in exchange. So it'll be a more lucrative offer if they do it that way. So honestly, in that way, if they're clever enough to avoid getting captured, which part of me kind of hopes they are, I think that would be excellent, then they can potentially have more lucrative, but they're going to have to successfully sneak and connive their way to it, right? So it's like choosing the more difficult path in order for a greater reward. And the other thing that's nice about it too is with this thing, if at any point they fail it, if they fail at sneaking around for any reason at all, then we can still default to them then being captured, and then we do the starting from prison route for this thing. So there's no way that this will dead end, so to speak, on them, which is kind of the important part here. I mean, we're talking about them being captured by unfriendly factions here, so there's a good, if you're not clever in how you write these things and plan these things out, this is one thing that's always really dangerous, and it's like dangerous, it's a challenge that I think about a lot when I'm writing, is that while it's very good for increasing pressure and upping the ante on things, the hard part about it is if we aren't clever in how we write it, the realistic thing is that they're just imprisoned and or killed, and that's the dead end right there. So you have to try and come up with motives for people to give the players a wiggle room to, escape, subvert, do things like that. And so good ways to do that are deal with the devil, right? Working with the king to try and figure out. Excuse me, my goodness, my GI is very belchy today. I apologize. It's not very relaxing or interesting. But yeah, so they can either make a deal with the devil, and say, okay, we're not fond of each other, but mutually beneficial, we can do this. We'll let you go free if you do this for us, right? If you become a double agent, something along those lines. Or give them opportunities to escape and sneak around and stuff like that. And here we've kind of planned out an option for both. So we're going to say departing. So main campaign, actually we want this to be one deeper here. So if captured and if sneaking, and then we'll say departing for vaults, right? So we need to do this. If a deal was made with the king, they can freely walk through the guarded gates. If no deal, we'll have to sneak past the guarded gate in some way, shape, in some way. I'm just gonna say in some way. Some way, shape, or form doesn't really make sense. Shape or form doesn't apply here. So if no deal, we'll have to sneak past the guarded gate in some way. Just put a note here. We'll say 3. We're just gonna put a couple of quick notes that we can use to roleplay that if it's necessary. 3 guards that are on rotation. 1 always. We'll say, I gotta think about exactly how I want the guards to behave that makes sense. And my thought is we can do, we can set it up to say, so 1 always patrolling in front of door. 1 always at upper guard post. 1 sleeping in reserve inside guard post. So like I'm imagining we set it up, there's just a gate set up. There's like an elevated guard post that there's one guy with a crossbow. There's one walking back and forth. That's sort of the main guard. And then there's always just one extra one asleep. So there's 3 guards on rotation. We'll say 1 sleeping, and we're going to put in not visible from outside. So we can kind of present that challenge. And there's not necessarily a prescribed approach to avoid this, you know, and to handle this particular challenge for them. So this is a really good opportunity to just let our yes and take over and let the players kind of invent their own progression, which is always fun. Like these types of situations, I always love the yes and for this one, because whatever players think of, as long as they roll sufficiently, you can just be like, yep, you figured it out. And players feel good at having figured it out. And a lot of times players will say like, oh, wow, it's really cool that we figured out exactly what the DM planned. And you can be there like, yep, that was exactly the solution, and you nailed it. And you can just kind of let them think you're smarter than you really are. That's how I live most of my life. Just, you know, keep things vague and then agree with stuff and let people think I'm smarter than I actually am. That right there, it's the fake it till you make it mentality. So 3 guards that are on rotation, and then we can let's see here. Gate is, let's see, 3 guards that are on rotation. I don't know if there's actually any other information that's relevant here. So you know, when I was talking about with proper way to outline things, right? In some way, we're gonna make that the same bullet point here. 3 guards that are on rotation, and then just move these back one. And there, now our formatting looks beautiful. And then there's one more thing I'm going to do here. Returning from vaults. And we're just going to say if deal was made, can simply knock on the door and be allowed back in, or if deal was made. And then the alternative is if no deal, see above, sneaking parameters, and then we'll say we'll also need to sneak back through wherever, or sneak back to whatever their next destination is. Boom, there we go. And there we go. That gives us some good story beats there. So that's a good set of mission hooks. It's a lot of detail in Khagdural. The other thing that I'm going to do, and I'll probably end up copying and pasting a lot of this, but this plays into what I talk about a lot, which is never ever, especially if you're keeping. So this is one of the beautiful things about being able to keep our notes, you know, modern day technology, keeping our notes in a digital format. One of the things that's beautiful about it is you don't have to worry about time nor resource management when it comes to how many notes you write down. You can really go nuts, and you can have redundancy everywhere. You can put multiple different copies and iterations of the same thing in a ton of different places without it using up multiple pages in a notebook, without you having to think about it gumming up the works of your notebook, right? Using up the pages, you know, getting confusing about where it is. If you, with digital stuff, you can, I mean, this notebook can be infinitely large, which is one of the reasons I love using OneNote for all of this stuff. It can be as small or as big as I want it. especially nowadays because word processing is such an easy thing, even for a low-end modern computer to handle. You can really get nuts with it. Even if you're not using OneNote and just using Word documents, if you just have an organized filing system on your computer where you have like, some folder chains that are well labeled and make sense, you can set up folders exactly the way I have my notebook set up, and it works the same. You just have to load up a new Word document every time. And so with that in mind, we can take all of these notes and put them in as many places as we want or need, which is just such a handy thing. And so I'm a big fan of, like I say, using that redundancy, putting the same notes in multiple places. And the reason for that is simply because that way when I'm in the heat of the moment, right, we're in the middle of a session, my players ask me something, I'm like, oh, snap, I have notes for that. Where would it be? You can just kind of think to yourself, this is relevant, I'll click here, and then there it'll be. But if it's relevant in another place, which is our campaign template, we can take a lot of the same stuff and put it right in there. So that way, if that's where my brain goes in the heat of the moment when we're having our session, I still have all my notes, right? It's why I put in all of the stat blocks, even though I could easily also find those in D&D Beyond. If I already have my notes for a dungeon open, and I need to really quickly check and consult the stat block of a monster, I can just scroll up. It's right there. It takes me, less than a second. I'm not reliant on trying to remember which tab it was in, trying to wait for my internet, which is already handling the online session with the online mapping and game playing system, right? I can have my notes right there. I don't have to fuss with multiple windows. It's just right there in that same window. So I highly encourage anyone working on any of these D&D notes-taking, world-writing type of projects, any project you're working on, utilize redundancy. Have the same information in a lot of different places. It gunks it up and it makes the document bigger, but it just makes accessing the information you need when you need it so much more convenient. Don't be afraid to do that. The only time I really avoid doing that is if it makes more sense for me to, as I've done here, do a link to a page, right? And so with Ormic, we wrote a whole lot of information about him over in our foes and friends and factions sections, right? So I can just click on this and it'll bring us to, right, that brings us to the page right there. So that's the other way to do it, but it still meets that same concept of redundancy where you have that information accessible from multiple places. So anyway, as I always say, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Lot of blabbing about that, but it's been one of my keys to success. And it's been one of the biggest steps forward in me being a good, smooth, on-the-ball DM, is learning to have my notes always accessible wherever I am in my notes. So just passing that tip along. Good. My coffee's getting cold. That's my favorite. All right. I always notice whenever I make a hand gesture at the camera, I always end up looking to the side because I look to where my face is on the screen to make sure my hands are in the screen, because I still haven't learned to memorize exactly where I can put them. Like, I can't put it right here. You're not seeing it. I gotta put it up here. Like, I'm picking my nose, but like way up front. I don't know. It's not relevant to anything. I just noticed that. Anyway. So now one thing I need to do, and I realized I didn't even do this for our last section here, I need to update our notes here. So for this campaign template here, I'm putting a lot more detail in each sort of main story beat, right? Main campaign story beat here. So that way, if my players are at any point in time and they're just like desperate for clues about where to go next, I have a whole lot of information to know exactly what to do. And by putting in a lot of information for myself, it gives me a lot of different ways to figure out what small tidbits I can hit them with without downright telling them the answer, because you still want them to have the chance to figure it out on their own, even if they need a hint. Like, you want the hint to be kind of like a nudge in the right direction as opposed to a flat out, go here and say this to this person, right? You don't want to get that detailed with it. That kind of takes a lot of agency away from players, and that's not as fun for them. So we're going to say the Lost Tunnels, and this is step 4 in our campaign here. right? And so, like, as you can see, we've got all these different steps and stuff here. So for the lost tunnels, we're just going to put in here hooks. So the hook here, players, when returning to, let me see, actually, there's a lot of stuff that we might not have to reiterate because we have it up here. Legend of Old speaks of a key that was guarded by the Dwarven King in Khagdural. Yep, okay. Players will have learned that key is in Khagdural. The scholar will have told them that the most direct access is through the mountain pass that leads to the lost tunnels. And so that's the hook there. That's all we need. And now we can add some details here. Details. Now, one thing I want to put in here is just a note. Actually, I will do this here. Preparation here. Scholar will know that the journey south is long. Scholar will know that the tunnels could take days to traverse. Will inform players that the city is deserted of dwarves, but that any number of things could have taken up residence, right? And so it's like, that's a true thing, even though they don't know that the Duergar are there. The fact is, it's an underground tunnel system that was left abandoned because of how dangerous all of the monsters and creatures were making it. So it is certainly within logic's realm of reasoning that anyone would guess, like, hey, this is going to be dangerous, and even though we don't suspect anyone will be actively hunting you or watching you while you're in there, the fact is it's going to be dangerous and we don't know exactly what's there, so be prepared. So they can do that. And then we're going to say in the wow, I don't even know how that came about when I was trying to spell tunnels. In the tunnels, I need to navigate the rooms, increasing evidence about the Duergar presence in the tunnels. This is kind of like an easy one. Why do I keep spelling tunnels that way? Dunnerals? I don't know what I'm doing with that. The Duergar presence in the tunnels, and then that's really all we need. I guess we can say see detailed notes in, and then here's where we can go ahead and copy a link to page. So now here's a place where we can sort of outsource our redundancy. Just put the link to that right there. And just for the sake of making it look pretty, I'm going to get rid of that level 4 because the link will still work the same. So do that, and then our last thing is going to be conclusions and next steps. Let's see here. We'll say players will reach the end and encounter Duergar. We'll say if captured, will need to escape prison. If escape, or if avoid capture, will need to sneak around. And so now that's going to lead us to this next step, which I'm going to write up here. I'm going to add a little step 4.5, kind of like we did above here with our step 3.5. So lost tunnels, we're going to actually call this, we're just going to say Khagdural here. Khagdural. Step 4.5. And then we're just going to go ahead and do our hooks here. Just do the same thing. Players forced to interact with city to reach, we'll say learn about and reach vaults, either as prisoners or as I don't know, sneakers. That's like shoes. And we can actually see, now here's where I'm thinking we can kind of come up with this. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and utilize copy link to page here. We're going to utilize that approach. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. We wanted to go to campaign template. That's what we need. Actually, what we can do is we'll do that for the details here. Online details. Oh, well, okay. We'll need to. Word processing and whatnot can sometimes be a little finicky. For detailed functions in this city, and then we'll say conclusions and next steps. Players must enter. Players must depart for vaults in some way, dependent on how they found themselves in the city. So we can just kind of put that little note there. That's quick and easy there, but that way we just remember to do that. Like I say, a lot of this is just giving ourselves almost too much context. So that way, when we're, months or years from now after writing this, right, months or years from now later, when I pull it up again and I'm like, what the heck was I thinking? I have all these notes here, all these extra steps that will help me remember what the heck I was thinking. Because it's an easy thing. Like you think to yourself like, oh no, this is gonna be easy enough for me to remember. This is a pretty distinct thing. But then, you write a whole bunch of stuff, and 2 years later, you can't remember what the heck the first thing you wrote was, even if it was really good and you're very proud of it. So this next one, we're going to say the vaults. So now this part here, I'm not going to worry about putting things in here because we're going to go ahead and dive ourselves into the actual sort of the actual. What am I not remembering how to say? The actual dungeon notes page. There it is. There it is. Took me a minute, but I got there. All right. So we're gonna change this now. So we've kind of adjusted things. The actual mission, it's not taking place in Khagdural itself, like we had originally sort of thought was going to happen. Instead, we're gonna call this one the vaults. Level 5, and actually we're going to call this I'm going to call this the Dwarven Vaults. They just call it the Vaults, but that way when we're looking at the title we can remember exactly what's going on. So the next part of this whole process is now giving ourselves that sort of foundational bit of information that we need up front about all this stuff. So we're going to go ahead and figure a lot of this stuff here. This is just our quick reference stuff here. I almost think a lot about nixing this part because so much of this stuff is just inherently understood in here. But then I'm like, no, it's good to put this here because if I ever decide to mix and match pieces of other campaigns that I've made and I need to make sure I'm remembering exactly where stuff is, like what the proper difficulty is, what the intended party composition was. It's good to have those notes right there at the top of the page, so that way it's easy enough for me to just like copy this page and throw it into a different campaign or something like that. So we're gonna leave all this information and put this here. So the intended player level is 5 players at level 5. And that's as simple as that. Like the idea is that the average of 5 players being level 5 is about what we're targeting for this. Number of room sets. This is going to have 5 room sets. 5. Oops. Wow. That's what I wanted to do. 5 room sets, which means 5 sets of 10 rooms. So this is going to be, we're getting into some pretty big dungeons at this point, but our players are higher level, and if we want to keep them progressing towards level 10, we got to give them a lot of opportunities to get experience points. So the thing that I've also noticed, so there's a couple things that I've noticed about adding these dungeons. They don't necessarily take a supreme amount of time longer to get through for players, because they get better at using their characters, so the simpler battles are quicker for them to go through. Like they just have a better understanding of how to get through dungeons. They're much more expedient about a lot of those processes. And the other thing too is when you have this many room sets, and we'll sort of discuss this in a bit more detail when I start going through our experience points, breakdowns, and choosing what enemies are going to be present in this dungeon, right? Things start off, there's a much steeper incline of difficulty, so things start off much easier in proportion to their level than at the earlier ones, right? Because in the first dungeon, right, even though the monsters are even easier than the first set in this level 5 dungeon, because of how much further behind the players were, challenges were already up there, right? We already had a lot of difficulty for our players. But now when we're starting at level 5, right, in comparison, even though those easy battles are going to be harder than those battles that started off in that first dungeon, even though they're technically harder, because our players are so much better, both in a game mechanic sense of understanding their characters and playing better, and in terms of their characters just being higher level, it's a lot easier for them to get through those. So they can really blast through those first sets there, and that's just a really good way to do a couple things: provide them a primer on what else to expect later in the dungeon, right, and give them practice on using whatever new abilities and stuff they've gained and all that kind of stuff, as well as kind of giving them that feeling of being more powerful, so they can start getting that momentum as they then push towards the more difficult parts of the dungeon. So for me, that results in just not being afraid of making nice and big dungeons, even though this campaign wasn't originally set out to be a mega dungeon type of campaign. They all kind of turn out that way, but it's mostly because we're making sure we provide adequate challenge for all of our players. So the nearest city here, we're going to say this is a lot less relevant, especially when we're within the microcosm of our one portion of our map here, right? Because the nearest city for all of these places is really going to be Novotrokladny. We'll add in a little footnote about Khagdural is there, because it is a functional city, even though there's not much for players to do there. It is a functional city. We'll put a note there. But again, making these notes for myself to reference later in case I ever want to cut and paste anything that I've already created into a different campaign. If I put down that Novotrokladny is the closest city, then if I move to an entirely different hex, an entirely different part of the world, right, and I'm looking around on a world scale as opposed to this one hex within the world scale, I can sort of understand where in the world is Carmen Sandiego. No, where in the world that thing was taking place. So I can have an immediate understanding of what the atmosphere is going to be like and stuff like that. So we're going to go ahead and do Khagdural, and then in here, Novo Trokladny. Is that how I spell it? I always, when I haven't spelled Novotrokladny in a while, I always forget. And like the most embarrassing part is that it's right next to, it's like literally right next to it. It's right there that I have it, and I still am like, is that where it is? Anyway, so it's right there. And then the current overlord is, I can actually go in. Wait, where is it? This is where I wanted to put it here. I want to grab it. I'm just going to copy that and then come up here. Paste that again, just so that way we can have the quick link back to where we can find all the detailed information that we need about him. So that stuff's easy to fill out. Easy to fill out, not very essential for what we're doing here within the campaign, but very helpful from a larger world's building standpoint for when we're trying to make sure that this campaign in this region of the map meshes in well with the rest of the world as we continue on with more and more projects in it. So now onto a little bit more detail. The history of this, we don't need to do a whole lot. Most of this history is already discussed within the history of the city of Khagdural itself, because this is in a lot of ways considered an extension of that city. But even then, there's going to be a bit of a journey. I've got some stuff in mind for this, and we'll get there. But basically, the history for this is, as the dwarves of Khagdural grew their wealth, grew their extensive mining of the mountains, as well as eventual trade success with other societies outside of the mountains. A certain level of paranoia began to grow among the ruling elite. They feared that if the extensive wealth that the dwarves were amassing, that's not how you spell amassing, there it is, of wealth, that's what I'm going to do, that the dwarves they were afraid that if the extensive wealth that the dwarves were amassing, it's kind of a weird way to phrase that, isn't it? I should probably just say that they were amassing. There we go. They feared that if the extensive wealth that they were amassing became known to the rest of the world, they would swiftly be overrun with invaders looking to claim the wealth for themselves. In response to these fears, hi Kitty, what you doing there? Well, Kitty is over and enjoy the rare spot of sunshine we're actually getting here today. It's been very cloudy, very snowy lately, so it's nice when the sun beams out. Kitty is gonna enjoy the sunbeam, aren't you? Oh yeah. I need to get a second camera so you guys can have a cat cam. I swear, that would just, boy oh boy, would that skyrocket my popularity right there. I'm interesting enough, but if there's a cat on screen, anyway, in response to these growing fears, the leaders of the dwarves called for the construction of an extensively protected vault system in which the ever growing stockpile of precious gems and metals could be securely hidden away and protected. Boom, there we go. See, we're just gonna add a little bit here. During the unhinging, some of the wealthy elite attempted to hide themselves within the vaults, but they were never heard from again. Ever since, and then we're just add a little bit here, ever since the rise of the Durgar, many attempts to access these vaults have taken place, but all have failed as the twisted and unknown creatures within these tunnels have proven too much for any Duergar, we'll say squadron, I guess. I don't know. It's not exactly what I'm looking for, but yeah. For any Duergar squadrons sent down there. Presently, there are background plans to try again in the future, but no active efforts are underway. So that just gives us a little bit of history to understand sort of what we're working on here. So, okay, it's 12:30. I'm going to take just a quick break, just like a 2 to 5 minute break. I just need to run to the bathroom and then refill my beverage here. Trying to, I talked about it a bit yesterday. I'm trying to be a little bit better about maintaining my fluids, but naturally because of that, I have a much more active GI system without getting into too much more detail there. So I'm going to take just a quick 5 minute break. I'm not even going to stop the stream. I'm just going to put us, I made myself a fancy little resuming soon screen. Look at me go, pretending I'm all professional. But I'm gonna set that up. I'll be back in like 5 minutes, not even. But I just need to take care of the fact that I'm a biological being. There's a little cattail for you, as she decides with the most inconvenient time as I'm about to stand up to come over here and beg for attention. So, all right, so bear with me. I will be back very shortly. I promise it won't take me long. And then we will continue where we left off. So sit tight, everybody. I'll be right back. Alright, back at it. Here we go. Okay, thank you everyone. I appreciate your patience. I am refreshed and ready to continue for our second hour here. Alrighty. Okay, okay, we just finished up the history. That's right. Okay. Back at it. So, thematic elements here. This is just really good stuff to have for world building. I find having these types of notes here It's really good for a couple reasons. One, you know, when coming back to the dungeon in the future, like I keep talking about, if it's months or even years until I actually use this in a game, there's a very good chance I'll forget a lot of what I wrote and forget a lot of where my mindset was when I started writing this. So it's good to put in a lot of notes to sort of review and help myself understand what I was sort of intending for this dungeon when we get there. It doesn't mean that I can't necessarily change things up, you know, as needed based on the particulars of whatever campaign I'm running. You know, things change, and so sometimes you need to modify and throw a couple audibles. But if I at least put the notes there on what I was looking for, it can be a lot easier to sort of pick it back up and stay true to what we were trying to do. The other thing that makes it really handy is, suppose we start this dungeon and for some reason I have to take a break from writing this project in the middle of writing this dungeon, right? And it's like, I come back to it in a couple weeks or whatever, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh boy, I don't really remember exactly what I was trying to do. If we put these thematic elements in here up front, you know, and if we have these things kind of played out for us, it can be a lot easier for us to remember, like, okay, yeah, that's what I was going for here, you know, and it's easier to kind of slip back into that same writing mentality there. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that bit right there. So the enemy type and theme here. So the last one we did a lot of oozes and specters and stuff like that. For this one, I really want to lean heavily on the monstrosities and aberrations. I really want the vault to just be thick, absolutely thick, with like almost HP Lovecraftian type of weird, nasty, horrifying creatures. That's really what I want to do for this vault, because the idea is, you know, they start off in mountain passes, and then they reach the lost tunnels and they get a little deeper into the mountains, and then they reach Khagdural, where there's the Duergar, who seem like kind of the darkest, nastiest things in the mountain so far, because they get a little deeper in there. And then the vaults are them going even deeper into this mountain range, into these mountains. And so there's just this consistent, steady descent deeper and deeper and deeper into just the horrors of these mountains. So I really want things to just get as horrific and nasty as possible in this portion of the dungeon. I think that'll serve really well. I think it'll be really interesting and a really good atmosphere. Hi, Kitty. Kitty is next to me in her little bed. The important part is that she's very present and would like some attention, please. That's always the essential component of whatever she's up to when she's nearby. I know, little goofball. So, with our enemy type and theme here, I'm going to say stick with, aberrations, there's only one B, that's why. Stick with aberrations, and monstrosities. Keep things classic, horror. You know, like real The Hills Have Eyes types of things, you know what I mean? What's that one, the Descent, right? That's the one where it's like the rock climbing or the spelunking crew that goes into the cave. And the deeper they go, like the more weird, nasty, horrible human type things they find. Like, that's what I'm thinking here. Oh, there's gonna be a cattail. There she goes. She can't leave and get off the desk, you know, in a non-disruptive way. She has to come right across. And of course I make it worse by calling attention to it, so who's the real fool here? Anyway, current boss of this dungeon. I don't know that I've decided on that. We can take a look on that, or take a look at that. But so the treasure and reward types here. So most treasures will be small things that they find in remnants of the various Duergar squads. Almost sounds like a fun play on Suicide Squad, the Durgar Squad. They got all kinds of wacky, witty individuals who also manage to kill effectively. That's the theme of Suicide Squad, for better or for worse. For better or for worse, especially considering we have 2 movies with the exact same title, both of them wildly different quality of film. Anyway, sorry, this is not a movie review podcast that I'm working on here. This is me goofing around and writing D&D stuff stream. So maybe I should just stay in my lane here. So all the things that they find in remnants of the various Durgar squads. The final reward, though, is key number 2, and whatever cool dwarven wealth they find and want to take. So this is going to be a situation where, like, the limit on what their reward is going to be more so about what they can reasonably grab and think that they're going to escape, and it's kind of escape with. And my thought is, I'll probably do it because no matter how they approach these dungeons, whether they're doing it sneakily or with the approval of the Durgar King, either way, they're not going to officially have permission to take all this stuff, and the Durgar are going to be upset. So I'm thinking that what we'll do is, like, for every pound or whatever of treasure they take with them when they leave these vaults, we'll add like a -1 penalty to whatever stealth or deception or whatever they try to do to sneak out with the wealth. So it's going to be up to them how much of a risk they're willing to take with it. Hey guys, how's it going? Calder and Gabby, good to see you guys. Glad you guys are here. So I think that's what I think that's what I want to do, but we'll get there when we get there. Puzzle and trap themes. We're gonna go ahead and say we're gonna say lots of dwarven traps meant to stop bank robbers. Very intentional traps like tripwires and pressure plates, stuff like that. Because sometimes we need our what am I trying to say? Our traps and stuff to be sort of like natural and whatnot in their aesthetic, but these ones, like, they're approaching a vault that someone's trying to protect. They can be very intentional traps. So new world building tag. Oh, I did not know that. I'll have to remember to start using that in the future. I don't want to do it now because I feel like if I try to change the tags midstream, it like cuts up the stream in weird ways. But that's good to know. I appreciate the tip. I'll have to start using that. I've wanted there to be a really good world building tag, but they haven't had one, and so I've just been sticking with writing alone and calling it good. But that's good to know. I will definitely have to use that moving forward. That's a really helpful one to have. Hopefully that'll help make it clear too, because I feel like sometimes people come in here and they see the Dungeons and Dragons and they're sort of expecting a play stream, and that's not what I do. That's why I try to make my titles descriptive about what's happening. But yeah. Anywho, I'll have to remember that moving forward. Thank you. Any other atmospheric notes? Let's see. We're gonna say mix of different specific settings, as well as a combination of narrow tunnels and wide open spaces. That's kind of what I want to do a mix of for this one. I've got some ideas. For how I want this dungeon to plan out, because we got 5 sets of 10 rooms, and I kind of want each. I kind of want to do. So let me pull up our map again here. So we're gonna be up here, and so what I want to do is I want to have the vault be like, because this is all mountains here. It looks like there's like an open field here, but it's all meant to be mountains. I just got rid of one of them to make it easier to see Khagdural there. But what I want to do is I want to have the vault basically be a downward, like a downward dive underground until you're basically underneath the lake here. and I almost have an idea of adding some pressure and intensity and adding some stakes to it by at some point in time having, like, maybe there's 2 different routes, and maybe we can almost do something like there's 3 sets of rooms that are getting to the vault, right? And then there's the vault, which is underneath the lake. But then when they access the vault and gain certain things, or at least there's the opportunity, there's the chance that part of the dungeon will be cut off because of a trap that the dwarves have set that floods one of the escape routes. Like, maybe it doesn't flood the vault itself, but it floods the obvious way there, so that there can be like a skill challenge for players to find the secret other exit that lets them get the final set of rooms or something like that to then return. And maybe like we can have the natural cutoff just be that there's like 2 obvious ways forward, but one of them has like the boss, and so maybe players will avoid that. Or even if they don't avoid it, you just kind of role play it, and basically it's like whichever route they don't take is the one that doesn't get cut off. Is sort of the idea I have. I haven't thought of exactly how it would happen, but I think it would be a really cool way to make this a dynamic dungeon and kind of change what we've been doing, where it's just like you get to the end and then you beat the boss and then you just kind of role play them walking back out of the dungeon. And instead of in this one, they reach their goal, their destination, and then suddenly they have to deal with one more set of rooms. They're not free because their escape route was cut off. So I think that would be a really fun, creative thing to sort of, throw into the mix. That's right, man. Literally too angry to die. That's a classic. That's a classic right there. Okay, so let's see here. So that's what I'm thinking for this dungeon. That's kind of what I want to do. It's kind of what I want to do with it. And so I'm actually, you know what I'm going to do? We're going to come back here. And where I was putting the other atmospheric notes, I'm going to say, we're going to say rough outline of pathway. I'm going to say room set 1. Actually, and what we can do with this one, actually, I'd like to say, I'm going to say overrun section of city. So like the first part is almost them going through the city, right? So there's a pathway that leads to the vaults, but I almost have in mind there's like a dwarven suburb of sorts between where this main, where we're this main city center, right? And so here's the pathway to the vaults. They go through there, and there's like I said, there's like a suburb outside of it that they go to first. And then, it's just that's been walled off and blocked off because it's overrun with different monstrosities and stuff. So they have to go through that section first. And then we can do set 2, room set 2 here is going to be, we're going to say, set of tunnels number 1. And then room sets 3 and 4. We're gonna say set of tunnels number 1 leads to sets 3 and 4. Do that. Room sets 3 and 4 both lead to the final portion of the here's an idea lead to the final portion of the dungeon. Check this out. We can do set 3 equals not equals 3 equals under, okay, because it's gonna do that and it's gonna be weird about it. We'll do the dash, or we can even better yet, we can just use our words. Set 3 is more, oops, dang it. It's more, I'm struggling right now, man. Some more underground tunnels. Set 4 is a reprieve. Reprieve, there it is. Apparently I don't know how to spell that. It's I-E-V, there it is. Okay, it's reprieve from the tunnels. as a, what we can actually do is as a mountain valley pass. We can set that up, and we can actually go ahead and we can make a liar out of me. Oops, that's not the one we wanted. We don't need dungeon draft. We need this one right here. Make a liar out of me and have it be maybe there's just a little bit of a valley here, right? There's mostly mountain, but then there's a little bit of a valley there for them to go through. And what could be really fun with that is sort of forcing them to have to think about, it's like whichever one they choose, right? We can do something like, yeah. And so what we'll do is do that, and then room set 5, accessed either by 3 or 4. At end is booby trapped to flood whichever route they took to get there. So either it floods the room that is accessible from the above ground, because like the idea that I have is the valley, really what it is that's meant to be sort of an alternative route out. There's 2 routes. You can either get there from below, like the valley is an alternative route to get to the room, so you can go through the valley to go down through just sort of like a mine shaft that will then lead to that final set of rooms that has the treasure in it, or you can continue in the underground passageway, is sort of the idea that I have. So we can, yeah, I think that'll work. So either way, we can kind of force them to have to take another alternative route. And Gabby, you are full of the memes today. I'll tell you what, you are full of them today. But yeah, I think that's a good setup right there. I think that's a really good setup. I think that's interesting. I think it adds a lot of variation. I'll have to kind of massage the details to make sure that it all kind of works smoothly and believably. I think the challenging part is going to be figuring out exactly how to rig the trap that floods it in a way that it would that we can say it cuts off their exit route without it feeling, like, oh, how convenient that we can't use this route. And what I almost want to do is make it so that it's really hard to find one of the routes, so that the easy and obvious pathway is going to be continuing down like the tunnels or something like that, right? So it's like the obvious way is to continue down the tunnels, and there's just a not obvious way to get to that valley. So that way it's like we just kind of subtly nudge them to one direction, and then you just kind of throw the audible if they take the valley passage first, right? And then you could just kind of throw the audible and be like, all right, well, the access to the valley is flooded off, because really what I'd like to do is set it up so that set 3, right, where you see that you can almost see like some magic or something, some ancient magic that's still in place that holds the water in place. Like you can almost see the lake, and it's just like there, almost like an aquarium, right? But like magically held up, just with some ancient enchantments and stuff that are still holding. But then them doing stuff will disrupt that. Will disrupt that. You are like I say, Gabby. You are absolutely full of them today. You are full of them. I can tell. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that gives us a good idea. The only thing that we need to do is the current boss of the dungeon. There are going to be multiple bosses and stuff like that, but I think it'd be really fun. I think it'd be really fun to have, so like, because I talked about how this dungeon is going to be full of a whole lot of different monstrosities and stuff like that. It would be kind of a fun curveball to throw the players to have them going through all of that and have to face all these monstrosities and stuff. But then the final boss, the final boss being just a creature of the valley, right? So it's just some large beast. So it's like they're going through and facing all these monstrosities, but then their toughest challenge just happens to be some sort of like particularly nasty creature, right? Like just like a big giant bear that's just like mega bear, you know, Godzilla bear or whatever. And it's just like kind of that curveball. Or they've been facing all these like nasty, hellish, horrible creatures that look like they come from the bottom of the ocean or whatever. And then it's just like, no, your final challenge is an eagle the size of a Boeing. Like, I think that'd be really funny. I think that'd be a really fun, like I say, a nice curveball to throw them. I think those are. I always like throwing players curveballs, you know, just to screw with them. And actually, the more that I think about it, the more I think I kind of want to almost railroad it. So that way, it's like the only way that's obvious to them is going through that first set of like the pathway that takes them entirely underground, and then once the flooding of part of this pathway is forced, right? It's almost like the floods themselves grant them access to a different way out. So like I almost have an idea that it's like maybe in that room set 5 that as I put it there, if we put there like a big like one room that is like a big cavernous room, and it's like 20, 30, 40 feet in the air, right, way overhead, way above head. There's like an access way, like they can see just sort of like a collapsed bit of the tunnel or something like that leads outside. And so it's like completely inaccessible for them early on, and you almost just describe it as being like, yeah, like you know, just like an atmospheric thing. You can just like casually say, like, as you enter this room, you can say actually part of the tunnelway seems to have collapsed with time, letting in a little bit of moonlight or whatever, you know, if you want to be creative about the time of day. And I think atmospherically it'd be awesome if they emerge in the middle of the night, and so they have to travel through the woods at night to find another access way into the mountains, right? But it's like you find, you know, you can see that thing, and then everything floods, so they have to just basically swim from room to room, and there's maybe some time pressure or something like that as the water is rising, you know, and they have to you know, kind of like rapidly work their way out. You can almost make a skill challenge out of it to then get to that room and then use the rising water to let them out, you know, to get them close enough to the surface, that moonlight or that sunroof of sorts to get through and out. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like, see, okay, you guys are watching right now the birth of an idea baby in my brain as like the one idea starts to form and turn into something that's actually clever. Water and rules lawyers. Well, actually, that's a good one. I like that one. That's clever. All right. Let's see here. So I'm gonna rearrange this. Actually, I'm gonna double down. I'm gonna commit to that idea. Room set 3. Hold on. There we go. Room set 3. More tunnels that lead. And so I'm actually going to take this off here. What we're going to do, you know, I'm just going to change. I'm going to change so much of it here. Room sets 2 and 3. Underground tunnels, a little more varied than the Lost tunnels, but same concept. And I just want to add that extra bit of space there because it bothers me when things get too crunched there. So let's see here. A little more varied than Lost tunnels. Okay, so room set 4 has the actual vault and final treasure, right? So that's going to be the room that we have all of that, or the room set there. Final treasure, trapped to flood and block block off the way out. Trap to flood and block the way out, but grant access to the final set of rooms. There we go. And then room set 5. The valley at the foot of the mountain that has a largely unused but still accessible access route to room set 1. And what we can do is overrun section of city, and what I'm going to do here is there is an exit from the mountains here. Oops. There's an exit from the mountains here, but play it off as just leaving and not useful in their approach to the vaults, which is true, right? It's not intended to be an access to the vaults. It's just a way out of the city. So there we go. Oh, nice. That is kind of an interesting idea. An entire campaign that takes place in inside of a dragon's body. That's an interesting concept. I feel like that would take a lot of thematic reskinning of a lot of things, but it would definitely be an interesting campaign. That's for sure. All right. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I like that setup. A little more railroady. It still kind of sets it up as one direct route, but that way it ensures that everything makes sense. And I think by doing it this way, it's not going to feel all that railroaded. I imagine that players, when they're in the middle of that, at least I know if I were a player and my DM did that, I would not think railroad. I would think like, wow, that's really awesome. Well done. Where do you sign up? Unfortunately, I do not have time to start any new games right now myself. If you are just talking in general, though, there are a million online resources that you can find. You can find groups. As much as I would love to do nothing but run D&D campaigns, that does not pay the bills very effectively. At least not in any current iteration that I would be running it. So I do not have the time to devote to more campaigns myself. As much as I wish I did. Because that'd be so fun. It'd be so much fun. I would love to one day be able to make a living as like a professional DM, where it's like you could rent my time at a game shop and like I can run like beginners campaigns for new players or something like that. That'd be super awesome. I would love to do that. Unfortunately, I don't believe that there is a particularly active market for something like that at the moment. So maybe someday. D&D is getting more and more popular. So, you know, who am I to predict the future? But let's see here. So, okay, so that gives us our thematic elements. I still need to think about exactly who the boss is going to be, but we'll get there. I'm just going to highlight it to remind myself that I still need to do that part. So, primary tasks here. This is a real simple, real obvious one here. So, primary tasks. Let's see. We need to just give ourselves a little bit of space to work with here. Regardless of the angle, the players are just trying to reach the vault and get the key. They may have to be sneaky for sneaky with an IE. That's a weird typo for me to have done. Oh boy. They may have to be They may have to be sneaky at some points, depending on how they got here and where they're going next. But the primary task remains the same. Bada bing, bada boom. There we go. Okay, that's easy enough. That's easy enough. Great. Let's see. What time is it? Oh, yeah, we got a half hour. That gives us plenty of time to work on kind of coming up with some of our enemies and stuff here. So that's excellent. That's really excellent. I need to... this is still the old thing that I had done here. I'm going to cut and paste this here, or copy and paste this from my revised template. I revised the template a little bit to make sure to help my self get all of the relevant parts that I need here. You can see there's a bit more detail here. So the boss of this one. So let's take a minute to think about it here. Let's do our XP breakdown first, because that informs a lot of this stuff. And so this part is a little tedious. If you have sat through me discussing how I go about figuring out what level of challenge and stuff to do, this will be a little bit of a repeat, a little repetitive. But whenever it comes up, I like to take the time and explain it, because this is a system that I have found to be pretty effective at setting up proper levels of challenge in any given room, in any given dungeon set, and it explains why I stick pretty stringently to the 10 room set with 7 combats within that set of rooms and stuff like that. Like it really informs all of that, and why I do it that way. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the time to explain it all as I do. So buckle up, buckaroos. We're gonna go through the process here. So the first thing we need to do is I need to remind myself, 5e level, D&D 5e level up XP. I need to remind myself how much experience points gets us from level 5 to level 6 here. So level 6 they need 14,000 points total per player. So that's 14,000 total per player, and they'll already be at the beginning of level 5, so they'll already have that 6,500. So we're just going to subtract 6,500 from that, which gives us, we need to provide, because the intention of this dungeon, right, the intent of this dungeon is that it will take 5 level 5 players from the beginning of level 5 up to level 6 is the intent of it. And that's why these dungeons are getting bigger and longer, because that's how I like to break things up. Players are allowed to leave dungeons at any point in time if they don't want to have just a non-stop mega dungeon experience. There's plenty of avenues for that, and as dungeons get longer, we'll see I'm going to start adding in other potential NPCs and other excuses for them to have, like written in story approaches to leave. So probably like in this dungeon, I'm probably going to put a couple surviving Durgar from whatever the last attempt to access these vaults were, that they can sort of befriend and like sort of have that unlikely allies type of thing, where they can either have an ally going through there, or they can sort of, if they want to, do an escort mission to leave, things like that. Like we'll come up with some details and some ways to do that. We'll get there when we get there. But the point is, this whole dungeon is meant to be a very large story beat that will take players from, like I say, the beginning of level 5 to level 6. That might not be the exact situation they're in, depending on how the campaign is gone, but that's how we're designing it. So we need 7,500 experience points per player, and we're designing this for 5 players. So we multiply that by 5. So this dungeon in total needs to have 37,500 experience points available in it, in some way, shape, or form. And I always do that. Through combat, understanding that I will absolutely use like like landmark or whatever they call it, leveling, where it's like if they just reach a significant story beat or something like that, I will give them extra XP or just flat out level them up. Like if they make it to the end of the dungeon and they avoided some battles, I'll say like, hey, you finished the dungeon, you get the enough experience points to bring yourselves up there. So it's not like I am staunchly uncompromising in it, but that's sort of how we start to break it down. And like I say, the big thing is that's what helps me figure out exactly how much experience points worth of challenge to give each battle that they'll encounter here. So there are going to be, I have it set as floor, but it's really room set, you know, as we've been doing it. One for each room set. Each set of rooms gets progressively more difficult. And like I say, the real cool value of doing it this way is things start off easy, which gives players it gives them the opportunity for two things. One, gives them the opportunity for low pressure practice with whatever new stuff they just got for their most recent level up, right? Because the last dungeon is when they would have leveled up to gotten to level 5, so they'll have new stuff having just reached level 5. So having those first set of rooms be pretty simple, pretty straightforward and easy for them is going to give them the opportunity to practice that stuff, kind of figure out the particulars of how new spells work, new abilities work, without it being like, oh, I use this in the wrong place and now we're really screwed, right? It gives them the opportunity for that. The other thing that it does is it gives them the opportunity to really feel their progress, right? If the earlier sets of rooms feel a lot easier, even though there's still significant challenge, even though that set of rooms is more difficult than a lot of the sets of rooms they experienced in earlier dungeons, right? Because of just the sort of gradual increase of challenge versus their level, it gives them the chance to really enjoy the fact that they're leveling up and they're getting stronger. Like players, you want to give players challenge, right? But if you don't give them the opportunity to recognize the fact that they have gotten better and have learned more tools, then it kind of almost feels pointless to level up, right? If you're always near death, even at level 20, and you've never had the chance to really flex your muscles as a level 20 character, you're going to wonder, well, what's the point of being level 20 other than just doing cool things? But, you know, if they are never actually more powerful, then, you know, what was the value of that? So by adding these easier sets of rooms in there, it'll just make things a bit easier for them. So the way we break this down now, this is where things start getting a little math heavy, and it's something that I've worked on a lot. And it's something, I will also say this may not be the method for you. You may not like running your games like this. Your players may not enjoy playing games like this. That is totally fine. I'm not going to sit here and say that this is the best way, the only way, the proper way. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying here is this is how I do it because this is how I like to design my dungeons, and my players seem to continue to enjoy playing in my dungeons that I designed this way. So I stick with it, right? It's one of those, why fix what isn't broken? So it works for me and the way I run my games and the way my players like to play games. Any of those factors could be different, so this may not work for you. But it's an option. So if you are interested in it, just you know, pay attention and learn, my friends. So what we're going to do is we're going to add all of these together, as in 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, right? We're going to add all those together, which gives us, what does that give us, 13 in this situation? I'm going to do it on the calculator just to make sure I'm not messing up, but I'm pretty sure it's 13. Yep. Oh, yeah, no, I was way wrong. That's why we add up. Yeah, because I did 2 plus 1 instead of 4 plus 1. So yeah, so it's 15. So we got 15. We're going to take that 37,500, we're going to divide that by 15. So we've got portions of XP broken down into 2,500 XP. So floor 1 is going to have 1 times that 2,500. So that's going to have 2,500 XP. Room 2 is going to have 5,000 XP. Right? And so that's how much experience points are going to be available in each floor, right? That's how we figured it out. So this next one is going to have 7,500. 1500 XP available in it. This one's going to have 10,000 XP available. And then this next one is going to have 12,500. All right, so that's all. That's how the XP breaks down. Because then if we add that all of that up and all of them, that will get us to our 37,500 XP that this whole dungeon needs to have to get our players up to our target level of 6. So I'm just going to do a little bit of formatting here just to make sure it all looks pretty and easy to read, because that's one of my little prefer, that's one of my idiosyncrasies. I need to have it looking all nice. That's just me. That's not something that is necessary for world writing and all that kind of stuff. It's just that's who I am. So that's how much is going to be in each floor. Now we need to take the time to math all of this out for each floor. I'm going to take away the boss battle section for each floor except for floor 5, because that's the only one that'll have an exceptionally difficult boss battle. All of these other floors will have their own little mini boss, right? So you can almost think about each of these sets of rooms being their own sort of partition within it, their own distinct set of things going on there that will result in a mini boss, right? So there's like that kind of checkpoint system of there being mini bosses as they go. So there'll be mini bosses, but the mini bosses I just equate to being a hard battle with a particularly unique enemy that's a little bit stronger than any of the other enemies, and he has a couple lackeys. But when we get to this last one, that boss, that's going to be a particularly difficult battle. So now, the way we do this, so each floor is going to have 3 easy battles, 2 medium battles, and 2 hard battles, or this one is going to have 3 easy, 2 medium, 2 hard, 3 easy, 2 medium, 1 hard, and 1 boss battle, right? But the way we break it up is we add 1 point, so there's 1 point for each easy, 2 for each medium, and 3 for each hard. And so what that's going to be is there's going to be 1, 2, 3 points for the easy, and then there's going to be 4 points total for the medium, right? Because there's 2 mediums, and we add 2 points for those. So 2, 4, that brings us up to 7. And then each of the hard battles will be worth 3 points. So on these ones that has 2 hard battles, that's going to bring us up to 13, right? Because we were at 7, plus 3 is 10, plus 3 more brings us up to 13. The difference is down here, we only add 1, 3 for the hard battle to bring us up to that 10, and then we add 4 points for the boss battle. So these are all going to be broken up into 13ths. This one's going to be into 14ths. So we're going to take our 2,500, we're going to divide that by 13. All right, so that brings us 192. We'll just round that up to the nearest 100 to keep things simple and straightforward. Easy battles are going to be worth 200 XP apiece. I want this to be lowercase because I think that looks prettier. All right, so now the medium battles are going to be that times 2, right? That brings us 384. We can round that up to 400 XP. It'll give players a little extra XP. No harm in letting them have a little extra. And then the hard is times 3, which then, you guessed it, will bring us rounding up to 600 XP. So that's our breakdown. That's how I go about doing it. And so that's how much experience points, that's how many experience points each of these individual battles is going to be worth. It's complicated. It's probably overbaked. There's probably simpler ways for me to have come up to the same conclusion and everything like this. But this is with me experimenting and years of DMing at this point in time, trying to figure out exactly how to balance a battle. It's not always perfect. Sometimes, depending on the specific challenge rating or whatever of a monster, sometimes I overshoot, sometimes I undershoot. It's not always perfect, but as a baseline starting point, this works pretty well, and it pretty consistently puts me pretty close to the mark on where I want the challenge to be for any given battle, based on what the parameters are. So now we just do it again for this. In theory, we can go ahead and just double all of these, right, because we've just doubled the experience points. But I like to start fresh just to correct for the rounding errors because we did have to round there. So we'll do the 5,000 divided by 13, right, and that brings us, again, our 384, which we can round up to 400 experience points, right, because that does still have the rounding. But then if we go ahead and double that, right, brings us up to the 769. I'm still going to round that up to 800 there. 100 XP. But then from there, our rounding might get a little difficult here. So for our hard one, let's go ahead and then times that 384 by 3, which brings us up to 1153. We could round that up to 1200. I'm going to put it as 1150 because we're rounding up for everything else, and that'll just make sure we're not accidentally increasing the difficulty quite too fast for what we're trying to achieve with our players here. Because the thing is, too, is we'll end up rounding a lot depending on what monsters are accessible, like what monsters exist within any of these rooms. We'll have to play kind of fast and loose within 100 or 200 experience points for a specific battle anyway. So there's already going to be a lot of rounding, but all the more reason to kind of keep it close there. So now, do our 7,500, do that divided by 13. So, and now is where things are going to start getting kind of tricky, and we can't really rely on using the past rooms to easily math it out. For our easy battles, that brings us 576. We'll round that up to 600 XP. For our mediums here, though, we can double that, which brings us up again to our 1153. We're going to go ahead and do 1150 for that. See, this is like, for me, I don't know, maybe this is just something that's weird with me. I have fun with this, too, because it's fun to see how, despite all of this math, it's just kind of fun to see the ways in which the numbers interact to repeat and form patterns and stuff like that. I don't know. That's just me. That's just me being weird, I'm sure. But then for our hard battles here, comes at 576 by 3. That brings us up to 1730. We'll round that up to 1750 for that one. So now, this one's going to be a little interesting to see how the numbers pan out here now that we're really getting up into those 5-digit numbers here. So again, that one divided by 13. So the easy battles would be worth 769. We'll round that up to 800. Even though the closer rounding to the nearest 50 would bring us down to the 750, we'll do the 800 experience points. Just because might as well give our players the access to a little bit of extra, so that way if they skip rooms they can still be leveling up appropriately without it being too much of a handout for me to just say like, yeah, you finished the dungeon, take a level. And also, you know, when you give them extra XP, it gives them the opportunity, especially when you throw in side missions on top of this, like the fact that the campaign alone will provide them the proper leveling that they need to. You throw in the side missions, that's just extra gravy, right? That's just extra for them and gives them the opportunity to be over leveled and really enjoy feeling powerful, which I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with my players feeling extra powerful. You know, if that's what they want to do, great. It's no different than doing all of the side quests in a video game first. That way you've got the best weapon by the time you reach the boss, right? It's like that's the point of providing those things. Your dedication and your commitment gives you access to all of the really cool stuff early. Okay, so now this next one, we multiply that by 2, right? Because it's now the 2/13 or whatever, rather than 1/13. That brings us up to, so you know that brings us up to 1538. We'll round that to 1550. XP there. Oops, not XP. Oh, just XP. And then for our last one, brings us up to 2307. We'll just do 2300. Alright, so there's that. So now this one is where things are definitely going to get different, because remember, now instead of doing 13 partitions, we're doing 14, because we want to save some of those XP points to make the boss battle something even extra insane. Because gosh dang it, it's just not a boss battle if you really don't feel like you're going to die. So we're going to take our 12,500, divide that by 14. And so for our easy battles, that gives us 892. We'll just round that up to 900 XP. For our medium battles, we can just multiply that by 2. That gives us 1785. We'll round that up to 1800 XP here. Our hard battle, we take that first value and times it by 3. That first 892 times that by 3. Gives us 2678. We'll just go ahead and round that up to 2700 here. Now you can see that we're really like, and like I say, so this really feeds into what I'm talking about how that growth, that increase in challenge really covers a wide range, so that these early ones, it's going to be nothing, right? And that's why we can comfortably say that even though this is a whole lot of rooms and a whole lot of dungeon for them to go through, this portion, at least as far as combat goes, it's not going to be hard, right? It's going to be very easy. They're going to feel very powerful. They're going to have a lot of fun just playing around with their new powers and their new resources, and they're going to have a lot of fun just one-shotting a whole lot of grunts. right? And that's just the, you know, they'll blast through a floor like this with this easy stuff at level 5 even. They'll blast through this floor in like 1 4-hour session, right? They will just absolutely clean that out. So I'm not worried about the fact that we're adding so much more stuff, because these first couple floors, these first 2 or 3 floors, easy, 1 or 2 sessions a piece to get through these ones. And then you get to these parts, and that's when they really start getting into the thick of things. That's when it's gonna start taking a lot longer. So just to sort of throw a little food for thought context in there. But now for our boss battle here, our final big bad boss here. I'm going to take that first 892, times that by 4. That gives us 3571. We'll round that up to 3600. Now, again, we'll take a minute just to see the difference. We're starting off, the easiest battles in this entire dungeon are with 200 experience points a pop, right? That's like 1 or 2 gnolls for them to smash up. And then the final boss, that thing is going to be just an absolute monster of a battle. And that's what I like. I like to see my players sort of gradually realize how much more challenging, how much more difficult and insane what they're facing is going to get. I really like that. I like doing that for my players, and I find that players really like that too. It gives them that almost Dark Soul experience, right, where it's like suddenly they're facing just this absolute massive beast of a creature that it just does not seem like they should have any right to beat, right? And it turns into a real challenge where they really have to focus and use their stuff right. But it's okay. They'll be prepared to do that, because since we're going to be sticking with like similarly themed and typed enemies going through all of these, right? When they get here, they'll be well practiced at handling things and knowing, you know, what to expect at any given time. So this one will be a little different, because we're going to throw that curveball of them suddenly being outside rather than in the tunnels. But we can find ways to make sure that different, like, weapon and attack types will have similar efficacy, even if the monsters are different. And we'll get clever with that. But we'll have to do that next time. We'll start looking at that next time, because I'm looking at the time, and it is almost 1:30 where I am, which means it's almost time for me to go ahead and take a break, so that way we can do some video gaming. But I'm okay with that. We got a lot of good foundational work for this dungeon done. We planned out all of our story beats. We've planned out exactly how this dungeon is going to progress while players are in it, and we know roughly what the breakdown of challenge is going to be at any given point in this dungeon, and that's a lot of really good, really important foundational stuff to have, which means that next time I'm looking up here at our villains and allies section, I'm thinking next time we can go ahead and start thinking about who they're going to encounter in here, whether it's friend or foe. We can really open up with that next time. So I'm really pleased with the progress we made here today. I think we're doing really well. We're moving right along in this dungeon. And I'm actually really excited about this dungeon, especially having figured out the concept of our story beats and stuff right here. With this whole, they're going to get to the end before they actually get to the end, and suddenly things are going to go haywire. They're going to have to find an alternate route. I'm really excited about that. I think that's a really fun twist of a dungeon to throw in there for players to have to encounter. You know, and it helps make it feel like, again, that's another way to help make things not feel like a mega dungeon, right? If we mix it up and the final part of the dungeon really to them just feels like an entirely different story beat almost, right? Because they'll have gotten the treasure, they'll have gotten what they're after, and suddenly they have to find a different way to return. That just feels like a story beat rather than a dungeon. But we can analyze all of that even more next time, because it's, like I say, it's time for me to go ahead and take a break, rest my voice a little bit, and then come back and do some video gaming. So specifically what's going to happen, I'm going to take a break for maybe, 15, 20 minutes as I do. Like I say, rest my voice, refresh my beverage a little bit, get geared up to play some video games, and then we're going to do exactly that. I'm working through Neverwinter Nights. I had thought I was going to take a break from it, but I was just having so much fun that I decided we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going with Neverwinter Nights. So that's what's coming up. So if you want to watch me, if you want to hang out with me and keep me company while I keep you company playing some video games, you can stick around or check back in 15-20 minutes and I'll be on gaming a little bit. Or if you're just here for the world writing type of stuff, the world building discussions, then by all means you can go and see if any other creative people are making stuff, because I know there's a lot of really creative people working on stuff. So feel free to check that stuff out. Let's see here. If you want to check out any of my other stuff too, just a note, I do have a YouTube channel where I upload all of my VODs. So you can see all of the past stuff I've written. You can see some of the other games that I've streamed. You can catch up with Neverwinter Nights if you're stepping in, midway through that playthrough and you want to see how things went for me leading up to this point. You can check that out too. That's all there on my YouTube channel. The link for that is on my Twitch page. Also linked on my Twitch page is the link to my Discord server. I do have that, where people share a lot of their homebrew stuff, and we can kind of have some discussions on other homebrew things that other people discuss. So if you got your own ideas that you want to share with me, then get yourself on that Discord and get yourself part of the discussion. We can get you verified there and have a good time with all that kind of stuff. So those two resources are there. As far as the rest of the week with streaming goes, as of right now, I am planning on streaming as usual, my Thursday, Friday. My usual schedule is always Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, streaming writing at 11:30 Eastern Time Zone. And so as of right now, this week I'm still on schedule to stream Thursday and Friday. That said, work has been filling up rapidly with a lot of different meetings and stuff here and there. So coming up in the next couple weeks, everyone's trying to get all of their pre-holiday stuff done. We're almost at the holidays, we're almost at a new year, so everyone is trying to finish off old projects so they can start the year fresh, which means everyone has a lot of meetings they're scheduling. So there's going to be a lot of strange gaps, different, slightly alternative times for streaming and stuff like that. So if you want the most updated information about that, get on the Discord. I do my best to put announcements there about when I'll be streaming and if I have to cancel streams. So ears perked, trying to keep with my schedule, but things happen. So we'll see how all that progresses. But I think that's everything that I got. I think that's all my announcements. So with that, I will say thank you so much to everyone who stopped by. It's really cool to me that people like watching what I work on. They like hearing my approaches to things. I love the conversation that people bring in here. This is just a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun doing this, and I really appreciate everyone who stops by. It's really cool. I'm glad you guys were here to keep me company and enjoyed me keeping you company. But with that, I'm going to take a break. Like I say, you can hang out if you want to see more of me doing other stuff, or you can go check out some of the VODs if you're just really interested in what I'm writing. Either way, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your support. And I will see you shortly. So hang tight, and I will be right back.